What happens when a guy decides to go to a whole other world in his teens and become a god-slaying badass who kicks butt and takes names? Well, let's follow Li Changshin's journey and find out. When humans find themselves in a rough spot, one they can't comprehend any way to get out of, more often than not they turn to a higher being. Whether that may be the god of their belief system or some other divine being, they turn to it and start begging it for mercy or help. But what is one supposed to do in such a situation if the gods themselves fall into crisis? This is the question sinking into the mind of the young man who's currently standing trial. And not just any trial, but a divine punishment trial for the twilight of the gods. All around him, mysterious hooded figures stand atop floating pillars as they cast their votes to decide his fate. Once the votes are tallied, the result is announced and the scene goes blank. When the young man next opens his eyes, he finds himself laying in a vast field with only a single type of flower spread around here and there. As he rises up, clad now in a simple black shirt and some dark pants, he wonders what just happened. As far as he's aware, he should have been erased from existence just now. A fate even worse than death as, unlike mortals, divine beings like himself do not simply die. Because that's a thing, I guess. Standing up, he attempts to call upon his system. Not explaining that bit, you all already know what it's about. OP gamer-like ability, etc., etc. Unfortunately for him, the system's gone to hell, much like himself. It tells him he has insufficient authority to access it, reminding him of what happened in his trial. His divine seat, faith, and status were all forcibly removed by the deities who judged him. The system does say that he should ask this area's manager about the precise circumstances of his situation, though, confusing him. Before he can ponder too much on that, another person makes their entrance. Docking at the bank of the river next to the field, a cloaked man steps off his boat and addresses the now powerless god. He reveals the former deity's name to be Li Changshin, Twilight of the Gods. His father's name was Li Zhongmiang. His mother's was So Yuha. He was born in Korea on Earth on the 25th of December 2001. Holy crap, is this dude just a cosmic stalker or something? Mr. Stalker goes on to talk about how Changshin went to the planet Arcadia in the year 2027 and became a star. An abominable god who killed millions of gods before being caught and brought to an execution ground. Saying all that, the cloaked man hears neither confirmation nor denial from the opposing side. Changshin is understandably disturbed by how much the man knows and leaps at him to attack. Unfortunately, his hidden bindings choose this moment to show themselves. Appearing around his wrists and feet, a golden material known as divine suppression steel is seen in the shape of cuffs. These restraints seal any being's power to less than even that of a mortal, with the option of forcing information out of the mysterious man no longer being viable. Changshin yells out a demand to know just who he is. Smiling down at him, the cloaked man introduces himself as the top reaper of the underworld, Yule, which means this is the afterlife. The river he's just boated across is none other than the Great Styx. Confused, Changshin asks why he's able to be here in the afterlife. From what he knows, a god is unable to escape complete erasure after the divine punishment trial. Telling Changshin he'll explain while they travel together, he gets the Twilight onto his boat, saying that the person who called for him is waiting. As they row over the river Styx, Yule explains just what's happened to Changshin. Because of his origins being of Earth, there's room to exploit some loopholes. The world he went to, Arcadia, functions on a completely different set of rules from Changshin's original home planet. All humans of Earth live with their fates and lifespans written in the record of life and death. However, when Changshin left to Arcadia, he went outside the reach of the record. Since then, they've been working hard to find Changshin and ended up having to give up quite a lot to have him return to Earth's system upon his death, schooling his expression into a neutral one. Changshin asks why they do such a thing. From what Yule said so far, his death would have solved their problem just as well. Annoyingly enough, the Reaper claims to be unaware of the reasons as he's just following orders. Orders from the great Thanatos, head of Tartarus and Erebus, king of the underworld. Pulling into the dock of a great palace, Yule tells his passenger they've arrived. As they disembark, Changshin is given a close-up look at the various torturous forms of hell that torment their prisoners. At his question, Yule explains that those are fallen stars, demonic and slash or evil gods who Thanatos has the duty of judging for their sins. When Changshin claims to have never heard of such a thing, Yule simply asks him why he would. Yeah, fair. I wouldn't be spreading that kind of info around either. Inside the palace, Yule leads Changshin to a pair of large ornate doors leading to the throne room of Thanatos. At Yule's announcement of their arrival, the doors are pulled open by a dark force. A terrible voice emerges from within, telling them to enter. Seeing a pair of eyes staring at him from the darkness and feeling the sheer overwhelming power exuding from within, Changshin feels a smirk taking over his face. This should be fun. Pretty rare definition of fun. Then again, he's already dead. What's the worst that could happen? Changshin steps into the throne room and comes face to face with Thanatos, the king of the underworld itself. As they stare each other down, Thanatos is the first to speak. He asks Changshin if he is indeed the twilight of the gods. Following that up, he asks what he thinks his afterlife would have been like if he'd lived his life out on Earth rather than leaving. When Changshin admits to never having really thought about it, Thanatos interrupts him with a wicked smile. Hell. He would have gone to hell. When Changshin questions why, Thanatos starts listing off sins and the overly torturous punishments assigned for them, and every single one of them is stupider than the last. Thanatos mentions things like swearing at his esports teammate and hurting his feelings, ignoring a message from a depressed friend because he was gaming, stepping on an ant and killing it, peeing his bed as a kid and blaming it on the family dog. Hella tongue-ripping for that one, almost understandably so. On top of all that, in 26 years of life, he never once held a girl's hand. Wait, that's a sin now? Damn, that means we're going to hell as well. As the list of offenses gets more and more ridiculous and the punishments get worse, Changshin finally snaps and demands to know what the point is. At this, Thanatos looks down at him and says it was a joke. All things considered, he lived a pretty normal life on Earth. When he went to Arcadia, though, he practically became a whole other person. He fought like a madman day in and day out and killed so many gods it's hard to even keep track of them all. Still not seeing the point, Changshin asks the ruler of the underworld once more why he saved him. Finally, Thanatos reveals his reason. He wants Changshin to do a little job of sorts for him. At Changshin's confusion, he elaborates on his words. Some gods have recently broken their divine oaths and made direct contact with humans. What he wants Changshin to do is go to the human world in his place and seal those gods. Hearing this, Changshin is shocked and asks if he's going to reincarnate him. Surprising him even more, Thanatos brings forth an illusion that displays Earth in all its beauty. Zooming in on a specific part of the planet, Thanatos shows Changshin exactly where he'll be returning to. His consciousness will be returned to his own body from his past life. Once there, he'll hunt the rogue gods on Thanatos' behalf. Still skeptical, Changshin asks why Thanatos is giving this opportunity to him in particular. Yeah, that's a real mystery, mister. I killed millions of gods already. Keeping his patient demeanor, Thanatos just tells him he's the most fit for the hunt. Taking a different approach, he decides to throw Changshin a bone. The ruler of Hell reveals that the dungeon break Changshin went through years ago was the work of the very rogue gods they're discussing. Finally understanding the situation, Changshin learns that the gods desire Earth itself for their own. At his question, Thanatos further explains that he and his underlings cannot undertake this task as they'd be breaking their own oaths too by intervening in the mortal plane. If a human were to do it though, well, that's a whole different story. With a firm grasp of the situation and his place at last, Changshin smirks and asks if Thanatos wants him to be his hunting dog, only to be killed once the job is done. Thanatos tells him it's more of a penal labor job, after which he'll free Changshin and leave him to live a new life of his own. At this point, Changshin's already appearing to be tipping over to agreeing with the proposal, so Thanatos decides to throw in one more benefit. If Changshin agrees to the job, Thanatos will grant him an authority to help him along. As the ruler of Hell, he can bypass the restrictions on such a thing and grant it to Changshin as a gift. Finally, with no more reason to do anything but accept, Changshin readily agrees to Thanatos' deal. With a large grin, Thanatos pulls open a scroll and declares the deal to be sealed. Calling out to his underlings, he orders for the Gate of Rebirth to be opened. Yule and Changshin take to the former's boat once more as they travel to the Gate of Rebirth. On their way there, Yule puts heavy emphasis on making sure Changshin remembers his newfound mortality. When he's reborn, it'll be as a simple human and nothing more. He'll be starting from the very bottom of the figurative barrel. None of his old abilities and experience available to him. Cheese, rub it in, why don't you? Changshin tries to be cool about it, but Yule just keeps going on, even mentioning that the divine suppression steel is still on his soul. If his suspicious circumstances are detected, he'll have to suffer the restraints being reactivated. As Yule finishes spooking the crap out of Changshin, they finally reach the Gate of Rebirth, a giant golden floating gateway with a yin-yang symbol punched into the center. Leaping towards the gate, Changshin pushes through with no hesitation. As he crosses the threshold, he turns to Yule and tells him they should meet again if the opportunity presents itself. Yule just says he'll be waiting. But as Changshin turns his back, a strange gleam enters Yule's eyes and he smiles ominously. He speaks out loud that Changshin must always remember. He's a reaper who has received the power of the king of the underworld. Meanwhile, Changshin finds himself in a rather unusual position after stepping through the gate. He's dozens of meters in the air, plummeting downwards in freefall. As he does so, though, a serene smile takes over his features. The system tells him he's being connected to a new server and data is being downloaded to optimize processing and loading times. While updating, it refers to Changshin with a new title of Administrator. The planet he's arrived on is none other than Earth. Well, kind of. Turns out Thanatos' deal had a couple of small catches, since Changshin's sudden appearance on Earth out of nowhere would alert other deities to his presence. He's been sent somewhere that's on Earth, but technically not there. That is to say, a random dungeon break which he must first survive to reach the normal human world. Just awesome. Luckily for Changshin, he's got more than enough experience to get through this. Even as the other humans present begin panicking, he rises to his feet in the clearing he's landed in and surveys his surroundings. The system reveals this dungeon to be the Rosewood Forest. With 432 players here now, including Changshin, its objective is simple: reclamation. Players must kill monsters in each of 5 sections of the forest and make their way to the top of the hill on the other side of the forest. With access to their own individual inventories and status and skill windows granted, the dungeon shall now begin. As soon as the first section begins, Changshin races into the forest, shocking the other humans, though most of them are just shocked by his actions. One young lady seems to recognize him as someone named Tyrant. Over with Changshin, he's learning something pretty unfortunate. Being human sucks cheeks. He's already out of breath after just running for a few minutes. Deciding to catch his breath, he stops in place and opens the system window to check his abilities. After forcing it open with his new administrator status/qualification, he checks his own status and skills. Or he would if everything's covered with freaking question marks. Whoop, never mind, that didn't last long. The system updates itself and reveals all the hidden data. For the most part, Changshin's stats are abysmal, his level being 0. However, there are 2 very noticeable abilities displayed proudly at the end of his window. The authorities granted to him by Thanatos, the soul extortion ability and the executioner's sword. With the former, he can store the souls of beaten enemies for either interrogation or more experience. Plus, he even gets to use the flames of purgatory. Meanwhile, the latter, Executioner's blade, is perhaps even more broken. With the power to dole out divine punishment, it can steal the authorities of deities who have broken their oaths. Despite being a pretty OP power, its limitation of only being usable on deities who've broken their oath more or less balances it out. Later on, Changshin can use it to steal the authorities of all the gods Thanatos wants him to kill and become all but on mission. For now, though, he'll have to leave it in his inventory since he doesn't meet the heavy requirements to use it. Until he can use it freely, Changshin vows to get stronger, even as a black mamba suddenly appears and attacks him. Pulling out his simple rusted dagger, he slices clean through the giant snake with a perfect attack, raising his level and earning a blade skill. As he stands in place with a smirk on his face, the system states that the divine being good season for hunting has taken note of him. While making his way through the forest, Hyun-sang thinks on the true purpose of dungeons. To ordinary humans, there's very little difference between them and the most devastating of natural disasters. However, they are also a door to new and exciting opportunities. Through dungeon missions, the gods above select priests and clerics who spread their gospel. But not only that, they also select apostles to execute their will. Those who display extraordinary abilities or skill in the dungeons are given this opportunity. Scores of humans have entered the dungeons in pursuit of the power granted by the gods and stars. All the same, scores of them have also died when the gods paid them no mind and they were left to fend for themselves in the ever-dangerous dungeons. Sounds like a skill issue to me. Get good plebs. Only a very select few ever have the luck and ability to meet the gods' requirements. Only then are they granted boons from the divine. However, there's one other way. If a being is to show an incredible level of talent and potential, this too can draw the attention of the gods. Such is the case for Hyun-sang right now, as the divine being known as Good Season to Hunt has taken note of him. Her true name being Pabalseg, she's known as the Goddess of War. Kratos won't like that one. With proficiency in every weapon form under the sun, she uses every single one of them to enjoy hunting to the fullest. To Hyun-sang, though, there's a more important benefit to gaining her attention than Pabalseg herself's favor. It is the fact that her mother is the primordial evil dragon known as Tiamat. More interested in the mame. I can relate to that if you know what I mean. His cocky smirk in place as usual, Hyun-sang comments that his dagger skills must have pleased her to already be showing interest when he's merely level 1. The system pops up and tells him Pablseg is curious as to what kind of hunting techniques he will be showing her next. Swinging his short blade to the side, he decides to give her what she wants if that's the case. As he travels through the forest, Qianseng realizes that the entire area is filled with poisonous air. Not only that, the monsters are likely to be poisonous too. Right as he's deciding on a plan to deal with that issue, a pair of black mambas slither out of the shadows behind him and launch a surprise attack. Unfortunately for them, there are a couple of legless lizards and he's a former god. Yeah, not really what I call a fair fight. In one swift move, Qianseng dispatches the snakes with his trusty rusty dagger, gaining experience and leveling up once more. After that, he goes on an absolute warpath, exterminating every mamba across his path as he fights his way through the forest. Thanks to the constant kills, his senses, focus, level, and overall stats see a considerable jump. While doing so, he remembers how the gods sentenced him to annihilation in his previous life simply because they were scared of his power, scared that he'd one day stand above even them. Well, he might not have had any intention of doing so before, but now, after what they did to him, he'll do just that this time. He'll get stronger, faster, smarter, everything he needs to do exactly what they're so scared of. Qianseng will stand above them all. Following his rampage against the forest's mambas, Qianseng is left with his dagger technique rising by a grade and Pablseg in awe of his skills. With his stamina depleted, the system warns Qianseng to return to his safe zone, but he has other plans. It's finally time to test out one of the gifts granted to him by Thanatos, activating soul extortion. Qianseng burns the souls of the mambas with purgatory flame and obtains their ashes. With this, he's recovered 5% of his stamina. Can't lie, I expected more than that, but it's still pretty busted. Even with just 5%, his status is no longer in the exhausted state, so he's free to continue fighting. Meanwhile, Pablseg is confused by the nature of the ability he just used and tries to figure out what category it falls under. While this would normally worry Qianseng, his newbie status ensures she'd never guess he has blessings from Thanatos himself. Plus, she'd have to breach the laws of causality to view his status window, and he's confident she wouldn't do something so reckless. Hell, even if she does, he's been granted a protection system from the underworld that hides his status window anyways. As he puts down yet another batch of mambas, Qianseng sees the system granting him some rewards for exterminating all the black mambas. He's now killed 444 of them, giving him a strength buff and low-grade poison resistance. Opening his status window, Qianseng ponders what to work on now. With his level and stats steadily rising, he's also gained magic power now. Thanks to that, he should be able to start using his skills. Not only that, Pablseg's interest in him has risen even more, something he can take advantage of. With the black mambas fully exterminated, he wonders if he should go for the red mambas and bloody mamba next. Despite it being low grade, his newfound poison resistance should be able to get him through the challenge. The bloody mamba in particular is considered to be a mob boss that can control lesser mambas. For a newbie under level 10, it would normally be insanity to go after such a beast. So naturally, that's his plan, and he's going to solo it. And he's going to steal its poisonous fang and gain complete poison immunity. Is that all? Thinking back on how he was beaten and captured for the Divine Punishment Trial, Qianseng reveals he was beaten through a combination of sheer overwhelming numbers as well as being severely weakened by curses and poisons. And not just any curse, but the curse of Gaia is what he was afflicted with. If he's to ensure something like that can't happen again, he needs that fang. With his face set in a grim and determined expression, he grips his rusty dagger tightly, and it shatters. Oops, with the blade's durability reaching its limit, it's now being destroyed. Before Qianseng can even think about what to do for a weapon, a much larger blade suddenly shoots down from the sky and embeds itself in the ground right behind him. Covered in dragon scale patterns, it's a weapon from Tiamat herself. To answer his confusion, the system tells him the sword is a present from Pablseg that she wishes to wager on a bet with him. If he wins, he can keep it. If he dies, she'll kill him. How the hell is that fair? Pablseg's offer, if it can even be called such, only serves as a reminder for Qianseng as to why he hated the gods so much even in his past life. All they think about is themselves. Every single living being below them is nothing more than a means of entertainment to them. Their lives hardly even register as worth existing in their eyes. Regardless of his reservations though, Qianseng knows that he can turn this particular situation to his advantage. Deciding to take his chances, Qianseng tells Pablseg that he'll accept her bet. As soon as he says this, Pablseg lets out a pleased laugh. The system displays a sudden quest called Hunter's Certification. Back in the safe zone where the rest of the humans are still situated, one man in a military uniform steps forward. He introduces himself as Second Lieutenant Park Hazam, C-rank player of the Awakened Force under the command of the Military Defense Support Command. Holy crap, that was a mouthful. As he issues instructions to the other, they calm down, feeling reassured that they'll get out of this alive. As some people wonder if the guy who rushed off earlier will be alright, one particular guy decides to start blabbing. He talks about how that guy, Chian-sung, is Tyrant, leader of the SD band with a huge fortune. He tries to spread rumors about how he became an alcoholic after retiring from gaming and is probably attempting suicide right now. But a series of system pop-ups shut him up just as quickly as they shock everyone else. All the black mambas have been killed. All the blue crows have been killed. The white worm has been killed. The red mambas are being killed rapidly. Li Changshin is going berserk. Seeing these notifications, the guy spreading rumors gets frustrated, wondering how this is possible. Stay salty, weirdo. Over with Changshin, he's making great progress towards his goal, said goal being to kill the bloody mamba. The bet he made with Pablsag was to kill the beast within 24 hours. In exchange, he'll get both Tiamat's blade and become Pablsag's apostle. With her popularity waning in recent years and all the best prospects already contracted to other deities, she's trying to snatch him up before any of the others can. Understanding her situation better, Changshin decided to up the stakes. Speaking to Pablsag, he told her he'll kill the mamba in now 24 hours, but a mere 30 minutes from now. Accordingly, with his reduced time limit, he'd like her to increase his reward as well. Amused, Pablsag accepted his proposal, prompting Changshin to rush off to win the bet. As he blitzes through the forest and its monsters, several other gods start observing Changshin as well, interested in his explosive progress. While Pablsag argues with them to stay away from him, Changshin focuses on his goal. Reaching the bloody mamba's position, he hides behind a tree while formulating a plan. With his level now at 10, he can choose a class. In order to win this bet, he plans to choose the Hidden Berserker class, which grants overwhelming strength in exchange for one's sanity. The insanity issue can be overcome, however, with some extra measures. With even level 20 players struggling to kill the mamba, he'll need the Berserker's high attack power to win his bet. With just 6 minutes left for said bet, though, he notices something quite massively concerning. The Berserker class isn't one of his options. Crap baskets. With the Berserker class unavailable, Changshin can practically feel his whole plan crumbling around him. The whole reason he took on Pablsag's bet was because he thought he could beat the bloody mamba with the Berserker class. Needing to find a different way to deal with this situation, Changshin quickly switches gears. Scrolling through the list of available classes, he chooses the Runekeeper class instead. While normally an underwhelming one, the sheer destructive power it's capable of outstrips even the Berserker class by 1.5 miles. Though Pablsag expresses curiosity as to what exactly he's planning, the other spectating gods just break down in laughter, thinking Changshin's made a stupid decision. Just you wait, douchebags, he's about to make you eat your laughs. As his primary class is set to Runekeeper, Changshin gains 2 new stats, Intelligence and Will. With only the 2 basic skills of his new class and 4 minutes left on the clock for his bet, Changshin starts preparing. Without hesitation, he pours all of his amassed stat points into Intelligence and Will, boosting his basic rune skills. Next, he leaps into the bloody mamba's clearing, baiting it into a rush attack that he dodges. Now in position to make his move, Changshin slices his own palm open on Tiamat's blade. Using the blood flowing freely from his hand, he puts a skill he learned from his grandfather to work. With the rune engraving skill, he splatters his blood onto the blade as ink and draws the rune of explosion on it. Ah, I see where this is going. Pablsag does too and laughs at his sheer guts. Though she's curious of how he knows the rune despite his newbie status, she's more interested in seeing how this goes for now. Thanks to the stats he put into Will and Intelligence, Changshin even finds his skill level temporarily increased. For the next minute, the rune of explosion will do 5 times its normal damage. With 3 minutes left on the clock, Hyunsang falls into a state of hunger and engages the bloody mamba in just as bloody battle. Back at the safe zone, the gathered humans suddenly see a massive explosion over in the distance. As one, they all wonder just what could be causing the titanic disturbance in the forest. As though to answer their questions, the system pops up to tell them Li Changshin has begun the boss raid. Naturally, they panic, but none more so than the dude who was talking crap about Changshin earlier. He insists that he'll get them all killed with his recklessness and demands that Lieutenant Park do something about it. What the hell do you expect him to do, you moron? He's a little too busy taking care of you babies. Sure enough, Lieutenant Park just politely tells him to stay in position and show some patience, though he's putting on a cool demeanor. It's a whole other story on the inside. He can recognize the yellow flashes from the explosion's smoke cloud as the effect when a player lands a critical hit. And there's not just a few of them either. At this moment, there are several dozen such effects all over the site. Seeing this, the lieutenant is actually hopeful that they can get through this. Whoever the man doing this is, he's clearly powerful. Sure enough, just moments later, a large explosion of golden light occurs before everything settles down. As the safe zone descends into silence, the system pops up to inform them the first boss monster, the bloody mamba, has been successfully defeated. But the total 5,000 contribution points for the dungeon's first stage. 4,999 have been awarded to Li Changshan. As Lieutenant Park stares at the man's back, he can't help but think he's witnessing the birth of a new member of the 10 Kings, whatever those are. As the humans in the safe zone remain shocked at what's just happened, the head of the bloody mamba suddenly peeks out from behind a tree. Terrified, they're just about to break down into mass hysteria when the creature is unceremoniously dumped at their feet. It's deader than a doorknob, and the body's just been dropped here by none other than its killer, Li Changshan. The lot of them are taken aback by the fierce expression on his face and the steely look in his eyes. Turning towards Lieutenant Park, Changshan asks him if they're all players too. When the man confirms this to be true, Changshan requests that they take care of any remaining smaller monsters since the boss has been dealt with already. Considering the sheer power and potential he clearly wields, Lieutenant Park is well aware that these words are not a request, but an order. He tries to offer Changshan some space and supplies to rest, but the Mamba Slayer can tell everyone's uncomfortable with his presence here. As such, he just tells the lieutenant he'll find his own spot to rest. Turning around, he leaves the safe zone, dragging the bloody Mamba's corpse behind him like a pet. Behind him, the normal folks mumble amongst themselves about how Changshan looked and acted practically like a demon. Meanwhile, Rumor Boy, that's what we're calling him since he still hasn't been named, is stewing in jealousy over Changshan's achievements. Over with the man himself, Changshan has made his way to a little clearing within the forest. As he settles down here, he thinks on the mutterings he heard from the others and grins at the idea of being seen as a demon. Makes sense. Dude hates the gods after all. The system pops up to tell him that an hour-long rest period has been granted before the next stage of the dungeon will start. That's perfect for Changshan, as he has a little something to do in the meantime. Using his newly gained rune engraving ability, he places the rune of obstruction on a nearby rock to form a barrier around the body of the bloody mamba. Coincidentally, this usage of the rune keeper skill also pushes its level up from lowest grade to just low grade. Hooray, I guess. Kind of underwhelming when it still has low in the title. That aside, he sets his mind to organizing the rewards from the day's conquests before anything else. For his achievements alone, he has gained 2 rewards. Apart from those, he has also gained another 3 from his Hunter's Certification quest completion. For his achievement rewards, he chooses to receive points rather than equipment since he already has Tiamat's blade, officially named the Evil Dragon's Snaggletooth. Yeah, super intimidating, isn't it? In total, he receives 15,000 karma as his rewards. The reason for picking this in particular is simple. From his past life, there's one thing Changshan knows to be a fact. Between this world and the real one, money is the universal factor that determines one's power. Even here, with enough karma, he can get the strongest items and equipment when the shops open up later on. With that done, he checks his status window. Unsurprisingly, his stats have all gone up considerably, proving that killing the bloody mamba was well worth it even without considering the bet with Pablsag. Right after checking his stats, Changshan notices several system pop-ups showing how the gods are showing much more interest in him now. Meanwhile, Pablsag is acting even more possessive than before, demanding that they stay away from him. Yanda Red Goddess? Yes, please. Changshan just chuckles at the development while Pablsag turns her attention to him. The goddess tells him he may choose whatever he desires as a reward for their bet. And she really does mean whatever he desires. Without a second thought, she opens the draconic treasury, revealing scores of invaluable items and equipment for him to choose from. Shocking all of the gods, though, he turns down her offer of a reward and closes the treasury. While the gods take this as a show of defiance, Qianseng is actually just abusing a feature of the system. By refusing a reward from the draconic treasury itself, the system will instead compensate him with a ridiculously large sum of karma. Bro's out here pulling the biggest of big brain and pro-gamer moves. Not only does he turn down the reward, he also turns down Pablsag's offer to become her apostle, stating that he plans to be a free agent for a good while yet. Offended, Pablsag swears that he'll regret making a fool of her today and roars at him before getting lost. Yeah, real scary and all. Changshin's just going to wipe his tears of fear with the 2 million karma he just got as compensation. Hang on, 2 million. Evidently, divine rewards are really valuable for that to be compensation. But this serves one other purpose Changshin kept to himself. By refusing Pablsag's advances and showing himself to be a player with a strong will to back up his power, even more gods will now flock to him in interest. Such a development will only aid him in his mission to seal the traitorous ones. With the conversation with Pablsag now over, Changshin turns to his next task, defiling the bloody Mumbo's corpse. No, not like that. Gross. He's butchering it for every single body part and organ he can extract, from its tendons to its eyes and whatever else can be of use. As he's doing so, the system informs him many more gods have gained an interest in him and are connecting to dungeon channel KR972 to watch his exploits. Man, he wasn't kidding about the gods only seeing them as a source of entertainment. It's like a twisted supernatural Truman show. Back at the safe zone, Rumor Guy is busy sulking about how he should have the power Changshin is wielding when he suddenly comes into contact with some sort of higher being. Named by the system as Owl that pierces through the twilight, this being finally reveals Rumor Guy's name. Jay and Chunjae. I don't really like him though, so I'm going to keep calling him Rumor Guy. Or maybe Salt Man. That aside, a bright light suddenly flashes over the top of the safe zone, depositing a single being in the center of it. This is the administrator for this dungeon, Harold. And it's a bunny. The bunny rabbit administrator thing starts laughing for some reason and apologizes to the players for disturbing the rest period. Fortunately, it won't matter either way in a moment. Unfortunately, that's because they're losing the rest period. Yup, screw them apparently. Because the dungeon's first stage has been cleared too fast and too easily. The administrative department has decided to up the difficulty of the dungeon going forward from here. The safe zone will be removed. The monsters will be more aggressive and their attack and defense powers will be increased as well. Lieutenant Park recognizes this phenomenon from a time in his past when he had to suffer through the same thing. For the purpose of drawing out the strongest of the Namvusas, they essentially throw them right into the deep end and see who manages to survive, which is essentially what the dungeons already were anyways, but now it's cranked up to 11. This phenomenon is known only as the filtering. Before leaving the area, Harold vanishes and reappears behind Lieutenant Park. The administrator tells him that they'll be keeping a close eye on him too, as he's the survivor of a filtering himself. With that said, Harold disappears. As canine monsters rush into the former safe zone, Saltman actually rushes forward to attack them, now wielding the power of the twilight-piercing owl or whatever it was called. Back with Changshin, he's just retrieved the bloody Mumbo's poisonous fang from its corpse at last when he receives the notification too. He too recognizes the filtering for what it is. Checking his current status, he's disappointed to see his HP, magic power, and stamina all in the danger zone. The biggest problem of these is the stamina, but he's determined to make things work somehow or the other. After rushing into the forest, Changshin comes upon the monsters that are set to be the main enemy for this stage of the dungeon. Fire lizards, with the last stage being poisonous monsters and this one being fire-based ones. Changshin wonders if there's a pattern here. If he's correct, the next stages should be ice, metal, and corpse based in that order. With that being the case, he's already figured out what the objective for this stage is to accumulate as much fire energy as possible. The method for this is simple. One must kill the fire lizards and gather the fire orbs they leave behind on dying. Sure enough, Changshin engages the fire lizard he's faced with in a fierce fight. He dodges the beast's attacks with practiced ease and counters with Tiamat's blade at every opportunity. Yes, I'd refuse to call it the freaking snaggletooth. With almost minimal effort, Changshin slices a trench clean through the lizard's back, ending its life and commenting that its stamina doesn't even compare to the black magma. If he came across a pack of them, it would actually be quite tough to hunt them all. Plunging his hand into the beast's body, Changshin retrieves an orb of fire. Without so much as a moment's hesitation, he chomps down the fiery ball and swallows. Rather than burning his tongue to a crisp though, the orb is absorbed and the system comes up. Changshin now has low-grade fire resistance and has accumulated 20,000 fire energy. After belching out a cloud of flames, Changshin takes off, ready to get some more orbs. After all, that is the next step to obtaining complete poison immunity. The 8 trigrams earns heat energy. Leaping off a cliff, Changshin descends into the midst of a massive horde of fire lizards, ready to take them all down and further his goals. So much for avoiding packs. Immunity to 10,000 poisons. a skill with an unparalleled level of value and usefulness. A skill that was the unique ability of one of the 12 zodiacs, Antares the Scorpio. More importantly, the old foe of none other than Li Changshan. In his past life, he was more than powerful enough to match and even defeat Antares. However, with his ability to resist all poisons and even recreate them from his own blood, he inflicted Changshan with the Curse of Gaia, a terrible poison curse that dramatically decayed the divine status of Changshan and left him defenseless against those who would do him harm. After that, when he was brought to Thanatos in the underworld, he actually underwent a good bit of training before being reincarnated into his current life. You see, the fallen stars were individuals who were tried as criminals and sent to the underworld by the gods themselves. Among these fallen, many hold grudges against members of the 12 zodiac. After all, those 12 didn't reach their positions without stepping on those below them, since those fallen reside in the underworld for their punishment. The realm of Thanatos himself, the king of the underworld, set up a special training for Changshan. The 10 elders, a group of 10 fallen stars, were called upon to teach Changshan their secrets, the secret arts of the gods themselves, with which he will be an even more formidable threat to said gods. One of the fallen shared with him a shortcut to gaining the poison immunity skill of Antares. This man, the first of the elders to teach him, was referred to by Changshan simply as the First Elder. Wow, little too creative with the naming their buddy. Back in the present and in the dungeon where he's making his moves, Changshan is currently stuffing his face with fire orbs from a horde of fire lizards he's killed. Unfortunately, even this level of fire energy isn't enough to kickstart the shortcut to poison immunity he was taught. That being the case, he decides it's time to find the base of the monsters and take the fight to them. Once he does that, he should be able to find stronger monsters and get more powerful fire orbs. Meanwhile, things with the group of humans from the safe zone have taken a strange turn, for lack of better words. Saltman has actually gained some level of power through the shady deity he's formed a contract with. Using this power, he's taken down a few fire lizards and thinks he must have surpassed Changshan by now. Geez, dude, talk about being obsessed. Just focus on yourself. Unfortunately for Rumor Guy, he couldn't be more wrong. When the system pulls up the dungeon ranking, he sees he's still only in second place, even with his solid 565 points. Above him and in first place is still Li Changshan, with 7,500 points, nearly 15 times what he has. That has to be embarrassing. Seeing the vast gap between them, Saltman convinces himself that Changshan must be using some kind of cheat or shortcut. The cope is strong with this one. Taking the opportunity to interject, the shady owl god dude he's made a contract with advises Salty Rumor Guy to use a shortcut too. Desperate as he is to get stronger, he agrees instantly and begs for more power. Back with the rest of the group, Lieutenant Park is concerned over how much people have started to envy each other and lose their sense of togetherness in this situation. This isn't helped much by Saltman when he walks into the clearing and makes an announcement. With the new skill that he's just received, he can turn them all into players so they can survive. Why do I feel like that's not what his real intentions are? Back with Changshan, he's made his way to a cave in pursuit of a flaming ram. But not the pink-haired maid, the goat-like animal. Striking it down in a quick move, Changshan grabs the beast's fire orb and gulps it right down. Before he can move on, he suddenly hears a terrified scream from further in the cave. Deciding to check it out, he heads inside. There, he sees a little girl being attacked by a giant bear monster. Not even needing to think about it, Changshan jumps right into action and cuts the bear down, saving the girl. After reassuring her that she's safe, he asks why she's here herself and where her party is. With tears in her eyes, she tells him that her party and friends are all dead. They were abandoned by a man named Jae and Chunjae. Who was that again? Oh right, Salty Mac Rumor Pants. What a turd. The little girl, who shall henceforth be referred to as LG, gives a more detailed explanation to Changshan after she's calmed down a little more. She shows him her forearm, which has a pretty creepy-looking tattoo of an owl on it. She tells him that Salty Pants said he could share the power of the goddess with anyone he bestowed the mark upon. The goddess in question being the owl that pierces the twilight. The truth, however, is much more sinister. Changshan can actually tell what's happened by just a glance. The mark that Salty Pants has been placing on people isn't that of the goddess, but the brand of a demon. It's a seal that symbolizes its wearer has sold their soul to a demon. The true goddess's symbol is nothing like this brand. When one with this brand on them dies, their components are split. Their vitality and physical ability are absorbed by the host of the demon, while the demon receives the souls of the deceased. Jae and Chunjae, that is to say, Salty Pants, is the host in this symbiotic relationship. Considering how many people he's branded, Changshan has to admit he must have gotten very strong by now. On top of that, the brand itself is too high quality to be just any demons. Rather, it's quite likely that the one behind this is a great demon, one that surpasses even the rank of Demon King. Regardless, Changshin's pretty confident it won't do much against him, so he'll just be on his way now. Or he would have liked to be on his way, but unfortunately for him, there's a little girl on the scene who's desperate for help, and despite his outwardly cold attitude, Changshin can't bring himself to completely abandon her to her grim fate either. When she starts desperately begging for him to make her stronger in exchange for any service he wants, Changshin pauses. The look in her eyes when she asks to become stronger, it's different from the average person. Making his decision, Changshin turns to the girl and asks if she's really sure about doing anything for him. When LG readily agrees, Changshin decides to put a plan he's thought up into action, and the first step for it is to edit the demon brand on LG's arm. Meanwhile, Salty Pants has managed to amass a whole ton of power from the deaths of several of his followers. At this point, even his single friend who came into this with him is no longer on his side. If anything, he's terrified of the man and sees clear as day that he's turned the rest of the humans into little more than his personal slaves. After rallying all his followers together, Salty Pants declares that they're making their way to the boss raid and taking it on themselves. Once he clears this raid, he'll put down Changshin for good, just like he did to him. Wait, when did that happen? Did we miss something? Further in the forest, LG can be seen running through the trees at immense speeds, several miniature tornadoes swirling to life around her. Many gods have tuned into the Dungeons channel to watch what exactly is happening. LG, for her part, just dashes straight through the middle of a full horde of rotting zombies. As she speeds past them, the zombies turn their full attention towards her, leaving them defenseless to the incoming attacks from Changshin. In a furious dance of steel against decaying flesh, he takes out every one of the zombies with practice ease. This is the strategy he came up with to utilize LG. Back when they were still in the cave, he figured out the little girl has major talent at running away. Or to put it in less rude terms, she's fast as frick boy. Taking advantage of that, Changshin has engraved the rune of captivation on her. With that, the monsters will all be completely focused on her when she runs past, but she'll be too fast for them to actually get to her. With their attention diverted, he'll come in from behind and take them out. Sure enough, that strategy's working wonders for the pair now, with every monster in a 300-meter radius totally obliterated by them. At Changshin's question, LG tells him she's also completed all the preparations he asked her to and even double-checked them. With stars in her eyes as she looks up at her reluctant savior, she asks if he needs anything else. Changshin simply tells her to get as far away as possible. The enemies that will show up now are far beyond anything she can deal with. Having complete and unconditional faith in him by now, LG happily agrees and speeds right off. As soon as LG leaves, a giant beast suddenly emerges from under the ground in front of Changshin. This is the dungeon's final boss monster, the decomposing plague spider. Standing proud in front of it, Changshin prepares for the coming battle and performs a strange movement that covers his eye. When he brings his hand down, said eye is engulfed in a golden glow, with his pupil reduced to an animalistic slit. As the terrifying spider monster emerges from the ground, the full horror that is its body is revealed, with limbs made of the human that have fallen victim to it. Enough pincers to make it look like it has a shark's jaw and glowing green-blue orbs all over its shell. The creature is a truly nightmare-inducing image. Without any time to react, Changshin takes a blast of poison gas straight to his face as he's reading the system pop-ups. The divine being, snake that wraps around the world, has gained a level of respect for him and has granted him a boon. For the time being, his special skill, Snake Eyes, will be upgraded to Viper Eyes. With this, he's given a view of the world around him that reveals all sorts of new things. From weak points to crucial environmental factors, the eyes and the sharpened senses that come with them show Changshin a whole new world of information. For the deity to give him this boon without any sort of conditions, Changshin is certain he wants to test just how great his power, and more importantly, his potential, really is. Quickly getting his mind into the fight, Changshin locks onto a weak point he can see on one of the spider's legs. Before leaping onto the offensive, he roars out a stream of fire, activating the low-grade poison resistance he currently possesses. Using the fire energy within him, the poison that entered his body earlier is completely purged from his system. Now fresh as ever, he dashes at the boss monster, slicing clean through the weak point on its leg with Tiamat's blade. As the spider lowers from the loss of a leg, Changshin rushes up his body onto its back. In order to fan the flames of the 8 trigrams urn, he needs something that'll burn. And nothing burns better than venom. And among the types of venom, the plague spider's venom glands are the best for this purpose. Leaping into the air above, Changshin shoots down at the position where the venom glands are located and thrusts his sword right into the monster's back. And then he gets bounced off like a tennis ball. Turns out the monster has a pretty hard shell. Who would have guessed, am I right? As if the failed attack wasn't enough of a disappointment, the rotting corpses that make up the spider's legs start projectile vomiting acid right at Changshin, forcing him to retreat. Yeah, that's not disgusting at all. Then again, most of this has been so far. With his level clearly being too low to fight the plague spider directly, Changshin decides to switch tactics. With the spider at his back, he runs the hell out of there. How about that? An actually relatable course of action. Later, Salty Pants and his followers come upon the site of Changshin's vicious zombie to deny that this could be the work of Changshin. The system brings up the dungeon rankings once more. At second place is him, J.N. Chonjae, with 1,230 points. In first place is Lee Changshin, with 29,550 points. Yeah, pretty big gap there if I do say so myself. Get good, Salt Master. Seeing how wide the gap between them still is throws Salty into despair. On his system window, the demon he's made a contract with demands that he stop sullying its name. The being is still masquerading as the goddess, and Salty is none the wiser. Given one last chance to prove himself, he swears to find out how Changshin is progressing so fast and steal the method for himself. Suddenly, a system pop-up reveals Changshin is currently embroiled in battle with the plague spider. Seeing this sets Salty off at the thought of Changshin getting all the glory once more. With a manic look on his face, he breaks into a sprint for the site of the battle. Back with Changshin, it's time for him to unveil his true plan. That is to say, the reason he's been running and leading the plague spider to a specific spot. As the creature chases after Changshin, its massive size sets off a trap he'd set precisely for the boss monster. The spider falls into a pit in the ground which has been engraved with explosive runes all over its walls. Less than a moment later, the runes go off, engulfing the plague spider in an explosion of epic proportions. Even as the spider burns wildly from the trap, another set of runes activates. The runes of penetration, and that totally doesn't sound sus at all. While still burning alive, the spider is also skewered all throughout its body by massive spikes of earth. As the snake that wraps around the world roars in laughter, Changshin's brutal traps. The man himself has a neutral expression. This is only the beginning of his traps. Completely ruined from the inhumanly vicious traps of Changshin, the plague spider, the final boss of the dungeon, the most dangerous monster in this dimension, turns tail and runs like a little biatch. Even the monster can recognize when it's outmatched, and the torture it just went through has more than scared it off of trying to hurt Changshin. Unfortunately for the arachnid menace, Changshin has no plans to let it escape. Unleashing yet another trap, he fires forth piercing projectiles that hurt the spider even more while he himself dashes towards it. Now in range of the monster, he releases more and more of his traps to weaken the creature while he attacks it personally as well. As the situation devolves into an absolute slaughter, Salty and his followers arrive on a nearby cliff and observe what's happening. True to his actual cowardly nature, Salty is too scared to intervene at this point and decides to jump in when the spider and Changshin have weakened each other enough to be killed. Not only that, he knows that Changshin tries to avoid hurting normal people, so he's planning to throw his followers at him as sacrificial lambs. For that, his sights set on a little girl whom Changshin saved previously. The scumbag's really got no low he won't stoop to, does he? Down on the site of the battle, Changshin has just hit the plague spider with a series of overpowered slashes, each more damaging than the last since they're all critical hits, successive ones at that. With this, the plague spider is finally obliterated in its entirety, leaving Changshin the victor. Descending to the ground, he grabs the spider's venom glands out of the sky, and without wasting a single second, he swallows the thing. The system's busy listing his level ups and achievements, while Changshin falls to his knees. Sitting in the midst of the plague spider's mangled corpse, he expels a cloud of toxic smoke from his mouth, upwards into the sky. The system announces that the last section of the dungeon mission has been cleared. Out of the 100,000 points available in the dungeon ranking, Lee Changshin has obtained 97,450 of them. A whole wall of system notifications starts popping up to inform him of his rewards and the gods that are showing an interest in him. Among these, one notification appears that states the dungeon will now begin closing, as more and more gods express their interest in speaking to Changshin. The snake that wraps around the world reminds him he was there before them and leaves. Despite all of this, Changshin remains in the same unresponsive position he's been in since swallowing the venom gland. Some distance away, Salty decides this is the perfect opportunity to cut him down. Together with his followers, he rushes right at Changshin, prepared to kill him in the most dishonorable of ways. Unfortunately for him, something isn't quite right. As he closes in on the plague spider's killer, he notices something disturbing. Changshin has a wide smile on his face despite their approach. As he breaks into laughter, a system pop-up appears before Salty's group to tell them they have fallen into a trap. Confused and terrified at the same time, he screams at Changshin, demanding to know the meaning of this. In response, Changshin simply stands up calmly and tells him it's simple. It means he's screwed. Well, he uses slightly more colorful words, but we don't use those here on YouTube. As one, Salty's forces rush at Changshin, determined to kill him. On his side of the field, Changshin simply stands up and maintains a firm grip on Tiamat's blade. With all the rewards and level ups just now putting him at level 20, he's been restored to full health. As soon as the enemies come into slashing range, Changshin takes to cutting them to ribbons with his blade. One after the other, people go down like flies, helpless to stop the force of nature mowing through them. Even the system acknowledges their situation and issues a sudden quest. It's simply called Escape the Ambush. Good lord, talk about being OP. There's dozens of them against one guy, and they're the ones being ambushed. The system then states that a divine being of an unknown name is observing the quest with interest. Before anyone can really react to it though, Changshin comes barreling through the group, cutting heads, limbs, and other body parts clean off their owners. In Salty's case, his rage at the situation just barely wins over the pure terror he's feeling. Drawing his own dagger, he launches himself at Changshin, and the two engage in a blade lock. Well, kind of, it's less of a lock and more of an insignificant annoyance for Changshin, as he just overpowers Salty's blade out of his grip. Instantly, he follows that up with an attack that crushes the demon contract user's arm. After that, Salty's left purely on the defensive as he tumbles back and forth to dodge Changshin's attacks. He tries pushing his followers into the monster's path, but they're cut down too fast to even make a difference. Finally, in the face of his imminent death, Salty finally accepts the simple fact that Changshin is too strong. Far stronger than him by any measure at least. But you think so? What gave it away, you moron? Knowing this, he desperately tries to find a way to gain more power. Up from the top of a nearby cliff, Lieutenant Park is observing the entire massacre play out in real time. Watching it, he realizes his suspicions were correct. Jae, Salty that is, was nothing more than a pawn of the gods. Not only him, but every single person on the battlefield below was a pawn for that matter. Their sole purpose here was to be a part of Lee Changshin's tutorial. It's exactly like it was back when he experienced the same thing, when he was left as the sole survivor of his dungeon break. Back on the battlefield, Salty attempts to draw in the power and vitality he receives when the ones branded with his demonic mark die. Unfortunately, after the process is initiated, the system suddenly notifies him that the absorption has failed. Before he can fully wrap his head around this, Changshin leaps in and attacks the man with a vicious slash, lopping his left arm clean off his body. Standing there, consumed by agony, Salty finally notices something that he really should have much sooner. His followers that are being cut down, the ones with the demonic brand. The vitality from them is flowing into Changshin instead of himself. Completely defeated and his spirit crushed, Salty simply sits there as Changshin tries to remember why his name sounds familiar. After thinking for a bit, he admits he still can't remember him, igniting a spark of rage within Salty once more. As it turns out, he was a member of the esports team led by Changshin and blames him for being kicked out. Well, that's underwhelming. All that rage just for that, seriously. Finally remembering Salty, Changshin just tells the man that his unsightly nature clearly still hasn't changed. Enraged, Salty raises his head to attack, but his spirit is crushed yet again by what he sees. Changshin standing in front of him, looking down at him condescendingly, as though he's nothing more than an insect. And above him, the system reads out that the divine being looks on at the pathetic servant as a worthless being. Tears streaming down his eyes, Salty screams in rage, infuriated by the idea of merely being a side character in Changshin's story yet again. In the following moment, he thinks back on every single decision that led him here, to this moment. And as Changshin's blade comes down to sever his head from his body, he can feel nothing but regret over his actions. Despite that though, he still ultimately blames Changshin for everything, even in death. Lee Changshin, on the other hand, has a very different reaction. Turning around to the gateway that's opening, he simply thinks of Salty as an annoying douchebag and steps away, cold. As Changshin turns away, something surprising suddenly occurs. From Salty's fallen body, A vast stream of purple energy emerges before swirling together and flowing straight into Changshin. As the remaining humans watch on in shock, a red symbol appears on his neck where all the energy is being absorbed into. And so, it's flashback time, folks. Days earlier, back in the cave where Changshin first met LG, he did something to try and help her out. The editing of her brand that was mentioned at the time. Using a knife made of a monster's bone, Changshin engraved a rune into the stigma, the demonic brand that was bestowed by Salty. With this, she too is now a host like Salty. Normally, receiving the power he wields would be too much for her and she would die from it. However, the rune he's engraved, the Rune of Path, will redirect the power so she can receive it safely. This is the very same rune that's currently appeared on Changshin's neck. As Changshin gets slightly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of energy flowing into him, the snake that wraps around the world advises that he take his time absorbing it. Better yet, he can just throw away some of it if he must. After all, it's not good to be too greedy either. Regardless, Changshin weathers the storm and manages to absorb all the stigma's energy. The snake is quite impressed by what he's managed to achieve with an otherwise simple and low-level rune like the Rune of Path. Changshin can only compare the feeling to that of consuming a 100-year elixir of subpar quality. With the absorption complete, the system suddenly reveals another observer. The divine being of unknown name tells Changshin that he's greatly impressed by him and would like to grant him a present. In 5 seconds, he will receive said surprise present. As soon as the countdown begins, the remaining humans in the area are suddenly drained of their life force. With each passing second, their vitality is being drained out of them and collected to be given to Changshin. As the humans cry out to be saved, Lieutenant Park watches from cover and appears horrified. This is just like what happened with him, and from the looks of it, Changshin won't hesitate to accept this present. Have some faith, will you, man? He's literally the least evil person you've seen in this dungeon so far. Well, except LG maybe. Sure enough, Changshin refuses the present when the system offers him a choice. At the divine being's confusion, Changshin states that he can't trust someone whose name he doesn't even know. After a moment of confusion, the divine being laughs at the realization that his name is still hidden. With just a thought, the being reveals its name. He is the great demon that chases after the abyss, Mephistopheles himself. Realizing that his expression of shock might give him away, Changshin quickly schools his expression and claims he was just surprised to be speaking to a demon. The truth is he knows way more than just that though. Mephistopheles is one of the strongest demons to ever exist, even among the great demons. An absolute monster even Tiamat herself would need to prepare before fighting him. Normally, he prefers to just keep to himself and stay hidden though. So why in all of hell is he here? Before he can ponder further, Mephistopheles asks him what he desires. Luckily, Changshin is saved from having to answer thanks to an interruption from Pabelsag. Turns out she was still watching this whole time and is now fighting against Mephistopheles' attempts to recruit him. As the two argue among themselves, Changshin returns his focus to the dungeon closing countdown. Right before the dungeon disappears, LG manages to reach him and pleads for his contact info. Instead, Changshin just tosses her the bone he used to edit her stigma and gives her instructions. If she goes to the address on the back of that knife, she can get stigma removed completely rather than the patchwork solution he came up with. That being said, he tells her to meet again if the opportunity arises and steps into the light of the gate. The next thing LG knows, the dungeon has disappeared and the surviving humans are being tended to in the middle of a street. LG herself is reunited with her panicking parents, though her mind remains fixated on the strange man who saved her when he had no obligation to. That night, Changshin sits on a bridge in the human world, staring up at the beautiful night sky. Thinking of the man he calls Gramps, Changshin admits that the method may be different from what he'd expect, but he's back home. As he walks around the city, Changshin silently observes the gods arguing over who should get to claim him. While his original goal was simply to get the attention of 2 or 3, his incredible success in the tutorial dungeon has brought the attention of many more than that. If anything, this may well be the first time so many gods and stars have been attracted to a single person. As he thinks this, the system tells him a scenario quest has formed. He must choose one protection god/star out of the many that are putting forth offers. Whichever one he chooses will then bestow him with their blessings and powers. Of all the gods who are extending offers to Changshin though, there are only a few that are actually of any consequence. Pabelsag, Mephistopheles, and Jormungandr. The snake that wraps around the world are 3 such gods. Each of them offer benefits that would be of great assistance to Changshin. Apart from them, there is one more. The divine being. Owl that pierces the twilight, Minerva, the very goddess who seal Mephistopheles tried to claim as his own back in the dungeon. As a goddess of justice, Changshin must have caught her eye when he overcame the temptation of Mephistopheles and saved the other humans in the dungeon. Because of that action, his own righteous and evil scale has been brought close to being balanced as well. As the time for selecting his god passes by, the system warns him that he'll be at a disadvantage to other players if he does not select one. The 9 gods in total who are invested in the matter are watching on with bated breath, intrigued as to what choice he will make. However, when the time for selection ends, he still hasn't chosen a god, leaving him to remain a completely free agent. While this does grant him an achievement, the gods are greatly angered by his supposed greed. With this, his fame has increased and his achievements have been stacked to grant 100,000 karma. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city stands the building of the WPCFF, the World Player Council for Freedom, better known as the Association. It works under the UN's Safety Management Bureau to manage the dungeons and gates that started appearing decades ago. Inside this building, 2 agents are currently buried in the task of locating L, a mysterious individual who is said to have cleared a 2-star dungeon out of nowhere despite being a novice and then disappeared just as suddenly. 3 guesses who they're talking about, as they ponder how to locate this man. Another agent suddenly rushes into the room, exclaiming that they found L, when one of the agents, Cheyenne, demands to know what they found. The new guy says he's at home. That is to say, L has returned to his house. Sure enough, Changshin can be seen taking his shoes off and entering a family home, and we see him again. As he's stepping in, an adorable little dog instantly rushes to him. Changshin, on the other hand, is entranced by a smell he hasn't been able to enjoy in centuries. Kimchi stew, hand-cooked by none other than his mom. Between seeing her, smelling her cooking, and petting his dog Kosen, the sensations he's feeling are almost more overwhelming than anything in the dungeon. After centuries on his own, Changshin is finally home. The end, for now.